Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin this very special session by thanking 중앙일보 for inviting me to this 중앙포럼. At the same time, I would like to congratulate 중앙일보 for holding this very timely forum in search of Korea's policy and the strategic options in this globally very difficult time. Indeed, the world economy today is challenged by highly complicated, complex problems caused by a variety of factors such as prolonged pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the intensifying the U.S.-China hegemonic competition, and the global geopolitics. Additionally, the U.S. and the other major countries' policy responses to those problems become another important factor affecting the U.S. and the world economic performance. We are very fortunate to have Professor Larry Summers with us this morning, who will best enlighten us in this regard. Professor Larry Summers served the U.S. government as Treasury Secretary from 1999 to 2001 and as Chief Economic Advisor to President Obama as the head of White House National Economic Council from 2009 through 2010. He also served Harvard University as president from 2001 to 2006. With these impressive credentials, he is globally most renowned economist, and more importantly, Larry Summers is widely recognized as the most influential economist in the world today. When he talks and writes, people, especially in the policymaking circle, listen and read. In fact, the U.S. Fed in the past made a serious mistake of not acting early enough in comparing inflation, despite with the Larry Summers warning. Professor Summers, please.
I'm delighted to be here and to have an opportunity to participate in this prestigious forum. I only wish that I could be with you in person. I think we live in complex times. I cannot remember a moment in the last 40 years when there was so much that was cross-cutting in so many ways. In much of the world, recession looms as a serious threat, but only in the context of inflation that is quite significantly above target. So my fear is that a term that was common in my youth, stagflation, but has largely receded for the last 40 years, is going to be making a comeback in the time ahead.
Currently, I think the consensus view among economists is that U.S. economic recession is inevitable. Now, in this regard, the question is whether or not the next year's recession will be shallow and short rather than long and deep. Could you make your observations on this, please?
I don't think there is any reason that is baked into what has happened so far why a recession needs to be comparable to the 2008 financial crisis, or why a recession needs to resemble the 1982 Volcker disinflation recession. Inflation expectations are better anchored than they were in 1982, and the inflation rate is somewhat lower. So I do not see a basis for assuming the kind of 10% unemployment recession that we had at that time. And therefore, my best guess would be that if we are successful in really containing inflation, the toxic side effect of sufficiently restrictive monetary policy will be an increase in unemployment to the 6% range. It may be that we will not be fully successful in durably containing inflation, in which case we may not in the near term see a recession of that kind of severity, but in which we will be continuing with a non-trivial degree of stagflation as inflation remains significantly above target.
Now, in terms of numbers, you did mention the unemployment rate already. In terms of the U.S. Fed's short-term policy interest rates, federal fund rates, what is your guess for the level of this interest rate, the highest level we should expect next year?
The market's judgment is that the terminal interest rate will be about 5%. If I had to guess, my guess would be that the terminal rate will end up having to be above that, because I think that forecasters have a fairly consistent bias. So my best guess would probably be that you would end up above and meaningfully above 5%.
Even then, as well as I do, there are economists and particularly those in financial markets worry about the U.S. Fed's so-called overkill. Especially, they are concerned about many vulnerable emerging world economies. Since the U.S. dollar is the most dominant key currency, and the U.S. capital market is the center of the global financial system. And therefore, the Fed's interest rate policy goes far beyond real economic impact on those countries, but through financial channels, there is very significant cross-border spillover effects of high U.S. interest rate. So they are concerned about the possibility of global financial instability, which may have also reverse spillover effect to the U.S. economy and policymakers. And what's your observations in this regard?
I share the concern. I think to the extent, and I think it's a legitimate extent, that real interest rates and the strong dollar are problematic. The U.S. can mitigate those adverse consequences by pursuing a policy of restriction that puts more emphasis on fiscal policy and less emphasis on monetary policy, though I think politically that's not likely to be easy.
In fact, your latest column in Washington Post emphasized the necessity of more intense international cooperation. In fact, thanks to international cooperation through G20, the world economy only suffered a great recession rather than a Great Depression.
That's exactly right. I agree with that.
Yeah, but now the problem is, at that time, you recall, actually, we sit together. China was a very active participant at the time, and China contributed greatly at that time. But today, the situation is different. So I think it is really the time for the U.S. leadership, U.S. government, really exert global leadership for the global public good. And since international cooperation is not a zero-sum game, I'm sure the Chinese has incentives to participate, especially since Chinese economy today is suffering various problems.
I'd be very much inclined to agree with you. Mm-hmm. I think that cooperation is very important in a moment like this.
In this connection, I would like to get your quick comment regarding the current U.S. government's unilateral and more protectionist-leaning economic measures, very similar to, or even more than, Mr. Trump's America First policy. Are you concerned about the demise of the post-World War II multilateralism-based liberal world order, the world economic order under which the world had an unprecedented world economic prosperity and human progress? And the U.S. is going the other way in this regard.
I share your concern.
Yeah.
I do think it's important to remember that a variety of things have happened since the heyday of more open trade. The United States is no longer in the dominant economic position that it was 2 generations ago. And understandably, therefore, it wants to take a more bilateral and multilateral view to the extension of benefits rather than simply providing benefits as to others as lubricant for agreements.
Now, since our time is running, turn to Chinese economy, if you will. I've seen so many so-called China pessimists during past couple of decades. So far, most of their views and the negative predictions turn to be mostly wrong. However, at this point, when China reached a middle income country level, requiring a fast and steady productivity increase to avoid the so-called middle income trap and to continue to grow. Unfortunately, at this point, I just cannot be as optimistic as before about the Chinese economic future, especially with the Chinese leadership turning towards more statism rather than the more market mechanism. And so the what I would like to know, and the audience would like to share, your assessment of the future of the China and its role in the global economy.
My instinct is to have very substantial concerns about China's economic future. I think that the challenges for China exist on both the demand side and the supply side. On the demand side, the question is, in a world that's no longer willing to accept large Chinese exports, in a world where China has invested so much in infrastructure that it laid 50% more concrete during the 2010-2020 decade than the United States had during the whole of the 20th century. Mm-hmm. And in a world where there are enough empty apartments in China to house the entire population of Germany, the question is, where is the demand stimulus going to come from? And the natural answer is consumption. But that is going to require very substantial reallocation of the control of resources from the 100 million people who are in the party to the 1.3 billion people who are not in the party. And I'm not sure the party's going to be willing to make those changes. Similarly, on the supply side, I think China faces some quite important trade-offs. I think the degree of state control, observation, and the possibility of arbitrary intervention that I think has arisen given the sense of stronger and less collective leadership that has come out of the party Congress. All of that raises concerns about the ability to manage productivity successfully going forward. Then you have the demography where women are having fewer children than they were during the time of the one-child policy. And I think all of that suggests to me that there is a real possibility that once again, extrapolative forecasting will have gone badly wrong. And those who forecast China to grow rapidly will, going on forever and surpassing the United States and so forth, will look as wrong as those who thought Japan was an emerging superstate in 1990, or those who thought that Russia would surpass the United States in 1980.
Since our time limit is getting closer, let's turn our attention to Korea. As you know, Korea is one of the most globalized, mid-sized economy in the world. And also, geographically and geopolitically, Korea is located in a very sensitive area and situation. So this country, Korea, to successfully wade through the current complex situation, what would you advise to Korean policymakers and strategists to do most importantly and urgently?
I don't presume to advise Korea, which has over time achieved one of the great economic miracles of the 20th century. That Korea today has higher per capita income than Japan. It's really a quite remarkable accomplishment that at the time when my career began at the end of the 1970s would have been almost unimaginable. I think Korea, as a significant member of the G20, can contribute much to pressing for enhanced international financial cooperation. I think that Korea has a crucial role to play in making sure that the world flow of semiconductors is healthily managed going forward.
Okay. With that, we may have to close our conversation. Okay, with this, I should thank you again for.
Thank you very much. It was very good to be with you.
Okay, so nice to see you. Okay,
Bye-bye.
Bye.